Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere damp, dim, and deeply unpleasant, Victorian England. It's the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution is booming, and you're waking up in a cramped, soot-covered tenement somewhere between a factory and an open sewer. The walls are sweating. The fog outside your single grimy window isn't just water vapor, it's part coal smoke, part horse manure mist, and part no one's bathed in a while fumes. And that's before we even get to the smells inside the room. You roll over on a straw mattress, shared with two siblings and a suspiciously warm spot, and suddenly it hits you. This world is rank. The air is thick. Your throat burns slightly when you breathe. You can't tell if your shirt smells like fish oil or someone else's feet, and you're not sure which would be worse. No one calls this the age of cleanliness. And spoiler, you probably won't survive this episode without contracting at least one historical skin disease. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from a place that smells slightly better than 19th century London, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who's brave enough to fall asleep in the filthiest time period we've covered yet. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You groggily step over a chamber pot, full of course, and tug on the same clothes you wore yesterday, and the day before, and probably since last Sunday's sermon. There's no concept of clean in your morning routine. There's a communal water pump 3 streets away, but the last guy who used it died of cholera 2 days later, so you think, maybe not today. The streets outside are already alive. By alive, we mean swarming with movement, some of it human, some of it distinctly 4-legged. Horses clop by, dragging carts full of coal, meat, hay, and at least one suspiciously shaped sack. And you remember the rule, always walk in the middle of the road. That way, you're less likely to be hit with a chamber pot emptied from an upstairs window. The danger isn't if, it's when. You dodge a puddle that might be rainwater, or possibly laundry runoff, pig's blood, or something worse. The air reeks of tallow candles, fish guts, and damp wool. You cough. A lady passing by coughs too, and her teeth clack loose as she does. Charming. And then there's the great stink. It's 1858. London's population has exploded, the Thames is full of raw sewage, and the summer heat has turned it into a bubbling, fermenting river of regret. Lawmakers in Parliament are literally gagging while trying to pass bills, because the smell is seeping through the curtains and assaulting their nostrils. It gets so bad they consider abandoning the city. The British government, famous for dragging its feet, starts talking about sanitation only because the smell won't let them ignore it anymore. Historians still argue whether the Great Stink truly sparked London's sanitation revolution, or if it was just a convenient excuse to finally listen to engineers who had been warning them for years. Either way, the river is a horror show. You pass a fishmonger scraping yesterday's stock off the cobblestones and a baker coughing black phlegm into his dough. It's somehow both heartbreaking and hilarious. You consider buying a half-penny meat pie, but last week's meat pie turned out to be half sawdust and half. You don't want to know. Plus, your last molar gave up and fell out 2 nights ago while you were sleeping. You kept it though. Maybe someone will buy it. The stink follows you everywhere. Sweat, sewage, and something sweetly decaying, like fruit or a foot. Even the well-off aren't immune. Queen Victoria herself reportedly hated bathing, preferring to sponge herself down occasionally in lukewarm vinegar water. And perfume isn't just a luxury, it's survival. Wealthy people douse themselves in floral scents not to impress others but to keep from fainting at their own body odor. One quirky tidbit. Some well-meaning Victorians believed strongly in the health benefits of dry brushing. You'd take a stiff brush and scrape your skin until it turned red, convinced this was removing bad humors, It usually just gave you infections. Self-care has never been so aggressive. As the fog rolls in thicker and the evening bell rings in the factories, you return home, skin sticky, hair stiff, and nose blissfully numbed by exposure. You lie down again in your straw bed, close your eyes, and dream of something. Anything. Clean. You wake up with your tongue glued to the roof of your mouth. Something tastes like last week's fish pie and despair. Your breath feels hot and sour, like a bad secret you've been keeping under your tongue for too long. Welcome to Victorian dental hygiene, if it can even be called that. To put it gently, your teeth don't stand a chance. There's no Colgate sponsorship in sight. Toothbrushes exist, technically, but they're made with bone handles and boar bristle heads, and they cost more than you earn in a week. So unless you're part of the powdered wig elite, you're more likely to clean your teeth with a frayed cloth, some chalk dust, or maybe, if you're really committed, burnt bread crusts rubbed directly on your gums. The result: everyone's breath smells like a combination of meat juice, tooth rot, and old beer. It's the kind of air you can chew through. People are missing teeth by 30 or earlier. You see your neighbor's grin, and it looks like a haunted picket fence. Still, there's a strong Victorian sense of propriety. A proper lady might chew parsley or cloves to freshen her breath before calling on friends, but not because she's worried about dental hygiene. It's about manners, not molars. Don't expect toothpaste commercials. In fact, early tooth powders are often made with brick dust or crushed porcelain, effective at polishing, yes, but also brilliant at stripping off your enamel like paint thinner. Minty fresh isn't a thing yet. Bleeding gums is. You hear a knock on the door. It's the neighborhood herbalist offering his latest miracle cure, a tooth tonic made of vinegar, sage, and rabbit urine. You say no, but only because you tried it last week and it made your lips peel. Historians still argue whether Victorian society genuinely believed in these home remedies or whether most people just didn't have any better options. The answer's probably somewhere in the middle, equal parts desperation, tradition, and sheer stubbornness. Meanwhile, dentists are, well, terrifying. Victorian dental work is more like carpentry than medicine. There's no anesthesia unless you count whiskey and prayer. A visit to the dentist involves crude pliers, zero sterilization, and someone strong to hold you down. Imagine someone pulling a rotten molar with a rusty tool and no gloves, while shouting, "Don't flinch. That's Tuesday." You watch as a boy gets dragged into the barber's, because yes, barbers still double as surgeons, and comes out with a bloodied rag in his mouth and one fewer tooth. The crowd outside claps. It's unclear if they're celebrating bravery or just enjoying the spectacle. Here's a quirky detail for you. Victorians actually made fake teeth out of real ones. Waterloo teeth, they were called, taken from fallen soldiers after the Battle of Waterloo and turned into dentures for the wealthy. That's right, you could be flashing someone else's smile. Let's hope they died with clean habits. If you're wealthier, you might own a toothbrush made of silver and imported bristles. You brush once a week, perhaps after church, as a symbolic gesture more than anything else. But even the Queen is not immune. Rumors say Queen Victoria had constant toothaches and was partial to soft foods later in life. Porridge, the great equalizer. Of course, sugar is everywhere. Cheap sweets flood the market, boiled candies, sticky toffee, jam on everything. The British Empire's obsession with tea and sugar means the working class now consumes more sweetness than ever before, and teeth are paying the price. You chew a barley sugar twist and feel a wobble in your bottom incisor. You decide to ignore it. That's what everyone else does. There's no floss, no mouthwash, no dental checkups. If your breath smells like something died in there, well, that's just being human. Even courtship doesn't seem to mind. Lovers exchange love notes that read more like gas leaks, flowery on the surface, but something foul underneath. Occasionally, a traveling salesman rolls into town with something new, electric tooth powder, liquid sunshine for gums. One man sells tooth magnets, claiming they realign your molars through magnetic energy. You see a woman buy one, strap it to her face, and immediately sneeze for 5 minutes straight. And in case you're wondering, no, children are not exempt. Baby teeth are often left to rot until they fall out on their own. You watch as a toddler chews on a lump of treacle, drooling happily, while two blackened stumps peek out where his baby incisors used to be. He looks delighted. You feel vaguely horrified. By the end of the day, your own mouth feels like a battlefield. You rinse it with warm beer, because it's cleaner than water, and hope you can make it through the night without any new pain. You lie down again on your straw mattress, lips dry, gums throbbing, and vow to keep your mouth closed while you sleep. Not for hygiene, but to keep the rats out. It's morning again, though you wouldn't know it from the color of the sky. The London fog doesn't lift, it just changes flavor. You scratch your scalp absently, then pause. Something moved. Something small. Something familiar. Welcome to the golden age of lice, dandruff, and despair. Hair hygiene in Victorian times is a tragic comedy of its own. You haven't washed your hair in weeks, but that's normal. Most people don't wash theirs at all. Not because they're lazy, but because the process is practically medieval. Shampoo as we know it doesn't exist yet. Soap is reserved for clothes, and occasionally the body, and even that's a stretch. If you want to clean your hair, you're reaching for egg yolks, vinegar, or if you're feeling fancy, raw gin. And yes, sometimes you rinse with rainwater collected in rusted buckets. Your scalp is dry and itchy, and combing it with a fine-toothed lice comb only seems to enrage the little beasts. Everyone has them, poor, rich, aristocrat, chimney sweep. The bugs don't discriminate. Women sometimes smear their heads with lard or kerosene to suffocate them. You tried it once. The smell lingered for 3 days, and you lost half your eyebrows in the process. Historians still argue whether Victorian society truly accepted lice as normal, or whether people simply gave up fighting them. You're leaning toward the second option. And the wigs, oh, the wigs, they're still around, especially for the upper classes clinging to outdated trends. Wigs are powdered with starch and flour, which inevitably attract bugs, mold, and sometimes mice. You spot a magistrate walking down the street, his silver wig pristine. But you know the truth. Underneath that powdered shell, he's probably crawling. The wigs aren't washed, they're refreshed. That means brushed, fluffed, maybe dusted with perfume, but never truly cleaned. There's a story going around that a noble woman once lifted her wig to reveal a nest of baby rats living comfortably beneath it. You want to believe it's just a myth, but after what fell out of your own hair last Tuesday, you're not so sure. If lice weren't enough, there's also ringworm, scabies, and a lovely little condition known as favus, a fungal scalp infection that smells faintly of cheese. Street children scratch their heads so hard they bleed. You try not to stare, but the scabbing is hypnotic and contagious. People also believe that frequent washing causes illness. Water, they say, can open the pores and let bad air seep in. So many opt for the dry grooming method, brushing vigorously, then dusting with scented powders. There's even a popular belief that brushing your hair 100 strokes a night will make it glossy. You try it. Your brush gets stuck on stroke 12. You pass a barber's shop where a man is being shaved completely bald. Not for fashion, but to rid himself of a lice infestation so epic it made the neighbors complain. He looks strangely liberated as tufts fall to the ground. You make a mental note. There's a peculiar Victorian gadget called a head fumigator, a little contraption you strap to your scalp, which pumps sulfur smoke into your hair to kill lice. It also kills conversation, apparently. You saw someone try it last week. They passed out halfway through, eyes watering, head steaming like a pudding. Here's a fringe tidbit for you. Some women believed washing hair during menstruation could cause permanent blindness. So, They avoided washing altogether, for weeks. You wonder who started that rumor, and whether they were also selling hats. In the fancier homes, ladies wear elaborate hairpieces made of real human hair, often harvested from poor women or the dead. These are coiled into gravity-defying styles that could double as architectural features. A maid spends an hour each morning pinning and spraying the hair into shape with rosewater and resin. But again, nobody's actually cleaning anything. Children, meanwhile, get the worst of it. Their heads are often shaved to avoid lice altogether. You see one girl with tufts missing, patches of angry red skin, and a suspicious crust near her ear. She looks proud of it, like she survived a war. And still, hair is a source of pride. You overhear a woman boasting about how long she's gone without washing. 12 weeks. It preserves the natural oils, she says confidently. You notice she has a visible flea climbing her temple. At the end of the day, your scalp is sore from scratching. You light a candle, lie back, and pray nothing crawls over your face while you sleep. Something does, of course. You swat it away and pull your cap tighter. Tomorrow, maybe you'll find someone to shave your head, or maybe you'll just pour gin over your pillow and call it grooming. It's the middle of the week, or maybe the end. Time blurs when there's no regular bathing to anchor your sense of existence. You stretch your limbs and grimace. Your armpits feel like warm cheese wrapped in wool. Your shirt has developed a personality. Bath time? Not quite. Victorian bathing habits are a masterclass in creative avoidance. The full-body soak is considered suspicious at best, dangerous at worst. Many believe that immersing the body in hot water too often can weaken the nerves, exhaust the spirit, or, if you're unlucky, kill you dead. Queen Elizabeth famously bathed once a month, whether she needed it or not. But by the 1800s, you shuffle to the kitchen basin and splash your face with a handful of cold, brownish water. It smells faintly of cabbage and rust. A rag nearby does double duty as dishcloth and flannel. You rub it under your arms and between your toes. Congratulations, you've just taken a dry bath. Soap exists, but it's wildly inconsistent. The poor use, soft soap, a lumpy brownish goop made from leftover fat and lye. It strips your skin and makes your eyes water. The rich have access to imported Castile or pear-scented bars, but even they tend to reserve them for company days or visible body parts only. The idea of full-body hygiene is more myth than practice. Historians still argue whether the average Victorian truly avoided bathing out of fear, or whether it was simply due to logistics, no plumbing, no privacy, and no patience. Either way, most people washed with vinegar, rosewater, or even urine. That's right, some folks believed that stale urine could whiten the skin and kill odors. You sniff your arm and decide, not today. Public bathhouses exist, but they're mostly for men, and they're rarely free. For a penny or two, you can rent a tin tub and a bucket of tepid water. Privacy is optional. Clean towels are mythical. The water? Often reused. You once watched a man exit a bathhouse looking dirtier than when he entered. He was smiling, though, because it was warm. If you're a working-class woman, you might bathe once every few weeks, usually on laundry day, when the big tub is already full. You'll heat some water over the stove, dump it into a barrel, and take your turn after the children. By then, the water looks like weak tea and smells like cheese rinds and regret. You wash quickly, in silence. You do not enjoy it. Of course, there are people who really go the extra mile. One woman on your street scrubs herself every Saturday with coarse salt and a horsehair mitt until her skin is pink and raw. Keeps the devil out, she says. You suspect it mostly just keeps other people away. Then there are the sponge baths, a proud Victorian staple. You dab your limbs with a damp cloth, then pat them dry with whatever's handy, a towel, a curtain, a small child. The key is to remain just barely cleaner than your neighbors. Clean enough to maintain dignity, dirty enough to avoid pneumonia. Here's a quirky detail. Some Victorians used bathing machines, wooden carts rolled into the ocean, so ladies could bathe without scandal. You're picturing a modest seaside moment, but in reality, it's a fully clothed dunk, chaperoned by attendants, with someone holding a rope in case you faint. Romantic, no? You pass a man dusting himself with crushed violet powder and rubbing lemon peel behind his ears. Cleans the aura, he says. You nod, impressed. Later, you'll see him fall into a manure cart. The upper classes, especially women, are obsessed with smelling good rather than being clean. Perfumes, scented gloves, floral waters, lavender sachets sewn into corsets. There are entire books written on discreet fragrance layering, all while the skin underneath festers. A duchess might smell like roses and heliotrope, but if you got close, you'd probably still cry. You catch your reflection in a puddle. Your face is smudged with soot. Your neck is gray. Your fingernails look like grave markers. You wipe your hands on your shirt, which helps nothing. You make a mental note to bathe tomorrow, maybe with vinegar, or gin, or fire. As night falls, you curl under a threadbare blanket. Your feet itch, your scalp tingles, and your pillow smells like soup. But your nose is used to it now. You inhale deeply and drift off, praying that your dreams are cleaner than your sheets. You wake up needing to pee. Badly. And that's a problem, because your options are all terrible. There's no indoor plumbing in your tiny flat. No flushing toilet, no tiled bathroom, no running water unless you count the leaky ceiling when it rains. What you do have is a ceramic chamber pot, tucked under the bed, filled to its modest brim from the night before. You consider balancing over it again, but decide against the risk of splashback. You've already ruined one pair of socks this week. Instead, you shuffle down the hallway, dodging snores and sleeping limbs, until you reach the outhouse in the back courtyard. It's pitch dark. The air smells like something unholy crawled in and gave up. You push open the creaky wooden door and behold your throne. A hole in a wooden board, swarming with flies and echoing with memories. Victorian toilet access is, frankly, a human rights violation. If you're lucky, your building has a shared outhouse. If you're not, it's chamber pot life. Most tenements house multiple families per floor, and each may share a single pot, or worse, a bucket. These buckets are emptied, eventually, usually by tossing the contents into the street. With a casual shout of "Gardez-le" to warn passers-by, down it goes. Rainy days are the worst. Everything flows downhill, including your dignity. Historians still argue whether "Gardez-le" was a real phrase commonly shouted in English cities, or just a romanticized detail borrowed from Edinburgh slang. Either way, you learn to walk close to the buildings, with a quick step and a hat pulled low. There's a night soil man, of course, a grim, necessary figure who makes a living collecting human waste and hauling it away in barrels. He works at night, usually half drunk, with a cloth tied around his face. He smells like legend. The children call him Puddle Pete. Public toilets do exist, but they're few and far between, and often cost a penny. Hence the phrase, "spend a penny." You've done worse for less. Once, you used a theater program as toilet paper. It was a matinee of Macbeth. You still feel kind of guilty. If you're out and desperate, you might duck into an alley. Many do. The smell of every back street in the city proves it. The rich, naturally, have better solutions, ornate water closets with mahogany seats and polished handles. They even have early bidets, imported from France, though they pretend to find them scandalous. But even among the elite, plumbing is unreliable. Pipes freeze in winter. Water backs up. One duchess reportedly had her toilet overflow during a dinner party, twice. The second time, they blamed the maid and switched to chamber pots, just to be safe. Here's a quirky side note. There were once urine tax collectors in some cities who charged fees for emptying chamber pots into public cesspits. Meaning, yes, your pee was technically regulated by the state. Makes modern plumbing feel like magic, doesn't it? You finally finish your outhouse mission and return to your room, stomach growling now. But hold on. There's another biological necessity we haven't covered, number 2. And that's a whole different adventure. Toilet paper? Not invented yet. The options include newspaper, pages from old books, hay, moss, and in the worst cases, hands and hope. A wealthy lady might use lace trimmings or fabric scraps. A poor man might use whatever he can reach without standing up too fast. You overhear a neighbor talking about her cousin who caught typhoid from using a communal privy at the workhouse. Should have used newspaper, someone mutters, as if that would have made all the difference. You nod solemnly, not sure if they're joking. As the sun rises, the smell of the neighborhood shifts. Bread baking, coal smoke, wet wood, but always underpinned by that one note, human waste. It's the bass line of the city's symphony. Horses clop past, occasionally relieving themselves mid-stride, as though protesting the lack of facilities. And then there are the cesspools. Giant pits beneath buildings where waste accumulates. Sometimes they overflow. Sometimes they collapse, taking cellars and unlucky tenants with them. You once heard of a man who fell into one and was never found again. People still cross themselves when passing his old house. At the very end of the street, there's a public lavatory recently installed by the city council. It has tile floors, running water, and partitions. But only men are allowed to use it. Women are expected to hold it or not venture far from home. You try not to think about the double standard while pacing your cramped room in desperation. By the time night falls again, you've stepped over 3 fresh puddles of unknown origin and watched a dog drink from one of them. You look at your own chamber pot and sigh. It's full again. Tomorrow you'll empty it. Maybe. For now, you tiptoe to the window, open it just a crack, and try to breathe in something that doesn't smell like someone else's Tuesday. Laundry day. Or as you've started calling it, Public Humiliation Thursday. You start early, because washing clothes in Victorian England isn't just a chore, it's a week-long saga. It begins with soaking things in a mixture of lye and boiling water. That is, if you can afford lye. If not, you use soap scrapings and ash and pray they don't dissolve your only shirt. Spoiler, they might. You drag your wash tub out into the courtyard and join the line of neighbors. Everyone's got the same haunted look, the look of people preparing to spend 6 hours elbow deep in water that will absolutely eat your skin. Your hands will be raw before noon. Your back will feel like it's aged a decade. And at the end of it all, you'll still smell vaguely of boiled sock. Victorians don't have washing machines, tumble dryers, or even reliable access to clean water. Instead, there's beating, scrubbing, wringing, rinsing, more wringing, and possibly a few tears. You smack a pair of trousers against a washboard until your arms go numb, wondering if it's even worth it. The dirt seems to win every time. Undergarments are the main culprit. They're made of heavy linen or wool, worn day and night, and washed approximately once every never. The result? They become stiff, stained, and, eventually, fused with the wearer. There are recorded cases of fabric rotting directly into the skin. One woman reportedly had to be cut out of her underclothes after a year of continuous wear. You adjust your waistband nervously. Historians still argue whether working-class Victorians avoided washing out of shame, cost, or simple exhaustion. Probably a blend of all three. Soap was expensive, water had to be carried by hand, and space to hang things was limited, especially in cities. Laundry had to be coordinated like a military campaign. You had to hope for sun, no rain, no soot, no passing chamber pot storms. And then there's the matter of privacy. Drying laundry means hanging it outside, often in a shared alley or communal yard. Everyone sees your drawers. Everyone judges your stains. You catch your neighbor squinting at your bed sheets with what feels like too much curiosity. Here's a strange but true tidbit. Some Victorian women believed that washing too often wore clothes out faster, So they refreshed garments by hanging them in the wind, spritzing them with lavender water, and calling it a day. One lady famously hung her corsets on the line with a sign reading "Still clean, just recharging." You consider doing the same. You know someone who takes their laundry to a professional laundress. These women, often widows or the desperately poor, scrub for pennies, handling hundreds of garments a week. Their hands are permanently cracked, and their lungs suffer from the constant steam and bleach. One famously said, "I clean filth all day and sleep in it all night." You tip your bonnet to her on Tuesdays. You reach into the wash bin and pull out your only shirt. It's gone from grey to a slightly lighter shade of regret. You wring it out and hang it over a rope by the window, hoping a passing coal cart doesn't undo all your work. Then there's the ironing. Yes, they do it. With actual irons, heavy metal beasts heated on stoves and wielded like weapons. You burned your fingertips once trying to flatten a collar. It left a mark. But a crisp cuff is considered the mark of respectability. You iron your best blouse and feel like a duchess until you drop it into the mud on the way to church. And speaking of respectability, Victorians are obsessed with it. A clean apron might save you from judgment. A smudged collar might cost you a job. It's no wonder people sometimes paint over stains with chalk or starch to fake freshness. Your final load is drying when a cloud rolls in. Rain. Of course. You scramble to rescue your garments, but it's too late. The sheets are soaked, and your trousers fall into the mud with a splash. You laugh, half-crazed. Your neighbor offers you a clothes peg in sympathy. Evening falls. You're exhausted. Your skin is pruny, and the entire house smells like wet wool and ash soap. You hang your half-damp clothes from every available nail and let them dry slowly by candlelight. You crawl into bed wearing a towel and hope your trousers dry by morning, or that someone invents a tumble dryer soon. You don't know what that is yet, but it sounds like a miracle. You wake with a dry mouth and a pounding headache. Classic signs of dehydration, except the irony is that water is everywhere. Just not drinkable. Victorian water is a roulette wheel of microbial doom. Most of it comes from rivers, wells, or public pumps. None of it is filtered. The concept of sterilization hasn't quite caught on yet, and even when water looks clean, there's a good chance it's carrying something that will make your insides go full Shakespearean tragedy. Take the Thames, for example. London's beloved river is also its largest open sewer. You pass it on your way to the market and watch a dead dog float past a man scooping up water for soup. No one bats an eye. The water is brownish, opaque, and emits the kind of smell that makes your soul recoil. And yet, people drink from it. Boil it? If there's time. But firewood costs money, and so does time. You glance at a nearby pump, decorative, cast iron, charming in that 19th century way. But you know better. In 1854, a particularly famous one on Broad Street became ground zero for a massive cholera outbreak. One physician, Dr. John Snow, connected the dots and removed the pump handle. The deaths in that area mysteriously stopped. It was one of the first major public health victories, but even today, many Victorians still don't believe him. Bad air, they say. Miasma. They don't blame the water, they blame the smell. Historians still argue whether Snow's breakthrough was understood widely at the time or only acknowledged decades later. Either way, you keep your distance from the pumps unless you really trust the neighborhood rats. So what do you drink instead? Alcohol. All the alcohol. Beer, porter, ale, gin. Anything brewed or distilled is considered safer than water. Even children are served small beer. A weak ale with just enough alcohol to kill bacteria. You watch a toddler slam half a pint and burp happily into his bonnet. His grandmother pats his head. That's my little man. If you're fancy, you might have access to mineral water imported from spa towns, bubbly, sulfurous, and wildly expensive. Otherwise, you boil what you can. or hope the rain barrel hasn't collected too many insects. Some households filter their water through cloth or even charcoal, but this is rare. One creative neighbor swears by pouring water through breadcrumbs. Another uses a sock filled with sand. You politely decline their tea. And then there's milk, a drink with its own dangers. Fresh milk spoils quickly, and pasteurization isn't a thing yet. Adulteration is rampant. You once bought a bottle that turned out to be 1 part actual milk, 2 parts water, and 1 part chalk. You got sick for 3 days, and now you only trust the goat. She's grumpy, but she's honest. There's also a peculiar Victorian obsession with tonics and mineral concoctions. One traveling salesman offers electro-hydrogen elixir that promises to cleanse your blood and purify your bowels. You try a sip, and your left eye twitches for the rest of the day. You assume that's the cleansing part. Meanwhile, the wealthy are installing cisterns and indoor pumps, but even these aren't always safe. Pipes are made of lead, water sits stagnant, and there's no such thing as pressure regulation. You've heard of ladies scalded by surprise eruptions of hot water in their copper tubs. The water systems are more decorative than functional. Like a cake made of cardboard. Here's a fringe fact. Some people in London still drink river water with full confidence that the Lord protects the faithful. You see a street preacher dunking his face into a puddle and shouting about salvation. You consider tossing him a bar of soap. At the market, you buy a bottle of lemonade, more sugar than citrus, but at least it's not brown. The vendor assures you it was made with boiled water. You nod, sip cautiously, and taste something metallic. Your tongue goes a little numb. You shrug. Better than dysentery, probably. The tragedy is that you're constantly thirsty, but never confident in what will quench it. You find yourself sipping tea all day, not because you enjoy it, but because it's boiled. It's survival, one steaming cup at a time. You understand now why people in this era are perpetually exhausted. The body's made of water, and this world seems determined to keep it out of you. As evening settles in, you eye the rain barrel near your door. There's a dead pigeon floating in it. You sigh, nudge it out with a stick, and pour the cleaner half into a pot for tomorrow's tea. Sweet dreams. Try not to think about your kidneys. By now, you've accepted that filth is your daily companion. But nothing quite prepares you for the street-level assault course that is walking anywhere in Victorian England. You step out your door, and the city immediately declares war on your shoes, your nose, and your general sense of dignity. The streets don't just look dirty, they fight back. Picture a stew of horse droppings, mud, soot, rotten vegetable peels, spilled beer, and, let's say, miscellaneous organic matter. Now add some broken glass and the occasional dead rat. That's the sidewalk, if you're lucky. Most of the time, there isn't a sidewalk, just rutted paths trodden into submission by thousands of boots and hooves. You tread carefully, dodging puddles of questionable depth. You've stepped in worse before. You once sunk ankle-deep in something that smelled like fish and turned your boot a color not found in nature. You burned the boot later. You didn't cry. Much. And speaking of horse droppings, there are so many horses. Tens of thousands in London alone, each producing up to 30 pounds of waste per day. That's literal tons of poop every single day. And no, it doesn't get cleaned up quickly. It piles up, dries out, gets churned into dust, and floats into the air with every gust of wind. You inhale deeply. Mistake. Historians still argue whether horse waste or coal smoke did more damage to public health in urban areas. Honestly, you're pretty sure it's a tie, and both are currently residing in your lungs. You dodge left to avoid a baker's cart and nearly get flattened by a carriage. The driver curses, flicks his whip, and gallops away, trailing manure in his wake. You spit soot out of your mouth and keep walking. Overhead, danger lurks as well. Chamber pots aren't always emptied discreetly. In fact, some people fling their contents out the window with only a shout of warning, usually "Gardy-loo." You pass under one tenement, just as a bucket of something slops onto the cobblestones 2 feet ahead of you. Close call. You nod in respect to the puddle. Today, it missed you. Tomorrow, who knows? Children splash through all of this with impressive immunity. You see a pack of them playing marbles in the gutter next to what is either a dead pigeon or the world's worst pie. One of them slips, laughs, and gets up with a banana peel stuck to his jacket. He's wearing no shoes, but that's common. Feet are optional in this economy. You pass a man shoveling dung into a cart, one of the sweepers paid by the city to keep things moderately walkable. He hums a cheery tune and offers you a nod. He's probably the cleanest person here. You consider complimenting his boots, but just then he sneezes violently into his hands and wipes them on his hat. You reconsider. Let's not forget the pigs. In some neighborhoods, pigs still roam freely, acting as unofficial sanitation crews. They root through trash, snack on leftovers, and occasionally bite a drunk person. You see one now, chewing on what might be a shoe, might be a ham. You don't look too closely. And then there's the rain. When it comes, and it always comes, it transforms the streets into rivers of sludge. Everything flows toward the lowest points, which are often where people stand waiting for bread, carriages, or mercy. You watch a gentleman lift his long coat, step into what he thinks is a shallow puddle, and disappear up to his shins. He lets out a short, polite scream. You nod in solidarity. Here's a quirky side note. Some Victorians developed special street shoes with extra thick soles, almost like proto-platforms, just to avoid stepping in filth. Others carried long sticks to poke at questionable puddles ahead of time. You've seen people walk in zigzags across the road just to stay on dryish ground. It's not uncommon to pass someone delicately tiptoeing through the chaos while holding a lace handkerchief over their nose, muttering prayers between gags. You finally make it to your destination, a bakery maybe, or the public pump, and you realize your hem is damp, your ankles are splattered, and something unidentifiable is stuck to your heel. You scrape it off on the edge of a curb and carry on. On your way home, you pass the corpse of a cat. Someone's placed a flower beside it. Victorians are sentimental that way. Poetic, even. You feel a sneeze coming on, but it's hard to tell if it's from the pollen or the street fumes. By nightfall, your clothes are stiff with grime, and your nose has gone numb to the smell. You strip down, hang your garments by the window, and sink into bed, vaguely aware that your boots are still damp and might never dry. You fall asleep to the sound of hooves outside, and the quiet splash of something hitting the cobblestones. You wake up gasping, not from a nightmare, but from the smell. It's thick, sour, and strangely floral. It hangs in the air like a guilty secret. You sit up and realize someone's been burning lavender. Again. That can only mean one thing. Another outbreak is brewing. Victorian cities live in constant fear of invisible killers, but not the kind you're thinking of. Germs aren't widely accepted yet. Instead, people blame bad air or miasma for illness. If it smells foul, it must be dangerous. Stagnant puddles, musty basements, sweaty crowds, these are the true harbingers of doom, they believe. Cholera? Typhoid? Just a whiff of sewer gas away. So people fight smell with smell. You watch your landlady walk through the hallway, waving a vinegar-soaked rag, muttering about purifying the corners. She's hung bunches of herbs near the doors, set bowls of onions on the windowsills, and even lit a pan of tar in the fireplace. The smoke curls into the room like a ghost with opinions. Down the street, you spot a man wearing a posy of flowers pinned to his lapel, not for fashion, but as a protective charm. Apothecaries sell scent packets, or pomanders, to carry around your neck or in your pocket. Some people just carry oranges studded with cloves, like little medieval grenades against the stench. Historians still argue whether the miasma theory delayed real progress or helped in indirect ways. After all, encouraging people to clean up foul-smelling areas did reduce disease. just not for the reasons they thought. So in a backward way, they weren't entirely wrong, just nosily misguided. Today, there's a particularly aggressive miasma panic sweeping through the city. The newspapers are full of dire warnings. Someone claims to have seen blue fog by the canal. Another swears a neighbor died just from sniffing a damp rug. You're not sure what's true, but everyone's panicking. The baker down the road just washed his doormat for the first time in years. That's how you really know it's serious. City councils spring into action, not with medicine, but with perfumery. Streets are sprayed with vinegar. Lime is scattered over sewage. Even Parliament is affected. Lawmakers have their curtains soaked in chloride of lime to keep the stink out. The smell of disinfectant is almost worse than the original problem. One clerk reportedly passed out from the fumes. He came to later and claimed to have seen angels. You suspect it was just an early bleach hallucination. And yet, the city is strangely proud of these efforts. There are official posters encouraging citizens to sweeten thy neighborhood. They show smiling children waving sachets of dried rose petals. Meanwhile, rats scurry by in the background, untouched by the power of potpourri. You pass a church where the congregation is praying to be delivered from the noisome vapors. The priest swings incense so thick you can't see the pews. Someone coughs, and 3 ladies faint simultaneously, possibly from piety, possibly from lack of oxygen. A quack doctor nearby is selling air filters, cloth cones you strap over your nose, dipped in camphor oil. He calls them breath protectors. You try one on. It smells like wet socks and pine. You take it off immediately. Someone else buys 2. There's even a rumor going around that bad smells can stick to your skin and poison you slowly. So now, people are rubbing themselves with vinegar-soaked rags. One man on your street has taken it too far. He douses his entire torso daily. He now smells like a pickle. Children follow him around, giggling and asking if he's edible. Here's a quirky fact. Some public buildings begin experimenting with early ventilation systems. One opera house installs a giant fan that moves air through ducts stuffed with pine needles. The effort is noble. The result is chaos. The fan breaks mid-performance, sending pine debris raining onto the audience during a tragic aria. 2 ladies scream. One man claps, assuming it's part of the show. You walk past a hospital with windows wide open, no matter the weather. Cold air is considered medicinal, especially if it doesn't smell of sewage. Nurses wave lavender bundles like torches. A patient nearby is coughing blood, but everyone's more concerned about whether the curtains are drawing in enough breeze. As the day winds down, you return home reeking faintly of vinegar, onion, and failure. You open your window to air out the room, only to be hit by a wave of horse dung and chimney smoke. You shut it again. You lie in bed, pulling the sheet over your head, breathing shallowly through a posy of crushed time. You know it won't stop whatever's truly lurking in the walls and water, but the illusion is comforting. And right now, comfort matters more than truth. You wake up to the sound of screaming. But don't worry, it's not personal. It's just surgery day next door. You lie still for a moment, listening to the familiar rhythm. Shout, clatter, moan, silence. The walls in your tenement are thin, and your neighbor's bedroom is currently doubling as a makeshift operating room. He's having something lanced. You don't ask what. You don't want to ask what. Victorian medical hygiene is, to put it politely, a bloody mess. The concept of sterilization hasn't caught on yet. Germ theory? Only whispered about in fringe medical journals and the occasional scandalous pamphlet. For now, most doctors operate on the firm belief that illness is caused by bad luck, bad smells, or bad thoughts. Microscopic organisms. Get out of here with that sci-fi nonsense. You pass a surgeon's office on your way to the market. He's wearing a crusted apron. The more blood, the better. It shows experience, you see. There are no gloves, no masks, and certainly no antiseptic. Instruments are wiped on the same rag used to dry his hands. The bone saw rests on a wooden table next to a half-eaten meat pie. You're not sure which one is sharper. Historians still argue whether the average Victorian doctor knew he was spreading infection and just didn't care, or if the connection was simply too abstract to grasp. Either way, you don't want to end up on one of their tables. Hospitals are equally grim. You've visited one before. Rows of iron beds, crammed shoulder to shoulder, patients groaning in symphony. Flies buzz overhead. The air smells of old wounds and coal dust. Nurses mop floors with cold water and occasionally flick crumbs off the sheets. One nurse offers you a smile as she changes a bandage without washing her hands. You nod and back away slowly. Here's a quirky side note. Surgical tools were sometimes passed from patient to patient without cleaning. Some surgeons even believed that cleaning them dulled their effectiveness, as if rust and gore made the blade somehow nobler. One prominent physician bragged that his surgical coat had never been washed in 14 years. It apparently stood up on its own. Anesthesia is a novelty, and even when it's used, it's far from perfect. Ether and chloroform are popular options when available, but dosages are a guessing game. Too little, and the patient feels everything. Too much, and the patient never feels anything again. You once watched a man go in for a routine tooth extraction and come out with a detached personality. Dentists, of course, are no better. Their tools are identical to a carpenter's. In fact, some are carpenters moonlighting as dentists. You once heard about a man who had his molars extracted with a pair of pliers and a brick. He claimed it cleared his head. You suspect it cleared more than that. Midwives and local healers try their best, often using herbal remedies and superstition. Some of their methods work, accidentally or by centuries of trial and error. Others, not so much. One popular cure for infection involves rubbing moldy bread directly onto the wound. Ironically, it sometimes helps. Penicillin is still decades away, but mold occasionally wins the day. You walk by a chemist's shop and peer into the window. Bottles line the shelves. Mercury tonic, arsenic cream, cocaine tooth drops. There's a sign advertising heroin syrup for coughs. You're not even surprised anymore. Everything is medicine if you believe hard enough, or if you're desperate enough. Bloodletting is still practiced in some circles, though it's losing popularity. Leeches are also on the way out, but you spot a tin of them under the apothecary's counter. He catches your eye and winks. You walk faster. Surgery is fast and brutal. Speed is everything. Some of the best surgeons can perform amputations in under 3 minutes. You once saw one in action. The patient screamed through the first 30 seconds, passed out by the second minute, and lost his leg before the third. The surgeon flung the limb into a bucket, wiped his forehead, and took a bow. The crowd, yes, there was a crowd, applauded. You threw up in a gutter. There's a famous case people whisper about. A surgeon who accidentally amputated a patient's leg and slashed the assistant's hand and cut the coattails of a spectator, who then fainted and hit his head. All 3 died. Fastest surgery on record, with a 300% mortality rate. You return home shaken, hands trembling. You pass your neighbor, the one who was screaming earlier. He's pale, missing a chunk of something, and holding a rag to his stomach. They say it went well, he says faintly. You offer him some tea, with gin in it, for the pain. As you crawl into bed that night, you feel a tickle in your throat. You try to ignore it. A sore throat in this world is not just a nuisance, it's a prelude. And the last place you want to end up is under a surgeon's bone saw with a room full of spectators taking bets. You wake to muffled voices and the soft sobbing of a woman down the hall. It's not the first time. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders and sit still, listening to the familiar rhythm of grief in a time when women's hygiene is both taboo and torturous. Victorian womanhood comes with a whole separate catalogue of discomfort, one that men barely acknowledge and women rarely speak aloud. Personal care for women in this era is cloaked in silence, secrecy, and shame. If you're a woman, your body is expected to remain pure, odorless, and invisible, while simultaneously surviving childbirth, menstruation, and the constant threat of infection. Good luck. You glance over at your makeshift drawer, just a wooden box tucked under the bed. Inside are a few rags, folded carefully. No elastic, no wings, no plastic packaging. These are your sanitary cloths, soaked monthly, scrubbed by hand, and always hidden. Washing them in public is considered indecent, so you do it late at night, in cold water, whispering apologies to no one. There's no such thing as a proper sanitary product, not for the average woman. A few experimental items are being sold in upper-class catalogs: rubber cups, napkin belts, even ladies' wadding. But they're expensive, awkward, and poorly understood. Most women simply bleed into cloth or nothing at all, and hope their skirts hide the stains. You've seen the looks when someone gets it wrong. You've given the looks when it wasn't you. Historians still argue whether menstruation was genuinely medicalized during this era or simply moralized into submission. Either way, it's treated less as a natural function and more as a problem to be quietly endured. You learn early not to mention it. Not at home, not at work, not even to your closest friends. And don't even think about bathing during your period. That's considered dangerous, something about opening the pores or disturbing the internal balance. You once asked a doctor about it, and he turned red, coughed, and changed the subject to weather patterns. Childbirth. A miracle, yes, but a terrifying one. You know 3 women on your street who've given birth at home with no doctor, no painkillers, and very little help beyond a neighbor who once watched a lambing. One of them didn't make it. The baby did, though, and now cries almost poetically at 2 a.m. every night. If you can afford a doctor, that's no guarantee of safety. Male doctors, increasingly taking over the birthing space from traditional midwives, often treat labor like a mechanical event. They bring forceps the size of fireplace tongs, and their hands, unwashed. Always. One friend gave birth after 14 hours of agony. The doctor called it a tidy effort and left with a bloody cuff and a slice of cake. There's no understanding of postpartum depression. No word for it. A woman who weeps after birth is hysterical. She may be bled, sedated with laudanum, or, if she's unlucky, institutionalized. You once heard a story about a woman who was locked in a room for 2 weeks with only cold broth and a crucifix. Here's a disturbing little fringe tidbit. There were Victorian devices for curing female hysteria that we would now label as profoundly inappropriate. They were sold as pelvic massages and recommended by doctors, often used without explaining their actual function. You blink slowly, trying not to think too hard about it. Everyday hygiene is no less absurd. Women wear layers of petticoats, bloomers, corsets, and undershirts, all of it difficult to remove, heavy to wash, and guaranteed to trap sweat. Bathing is rare, deodorant is non-existent, and modesty is everything. You once read a column advising women to bathe their ankles with rose water each evening, but only their ankles. Any more would be indulgent. And corsets, oh, the corsets, worn daily, tightly laced, pressing ribs inward and internal organs downward. You wear one yourself, of course. Not out of vanity, but out of necessity. Without it, your shape is suspect. Your morality, questioned. You've fainted 3 times this month already. Once in line at the butcher. They gave you a liver on discount out of sympathy. Even using the toilet is a nightmare. Public facilities for women barely exist, and when they do, they're often labeled retiring rooms or ladies' convenience chambers, terms that do more to confuse than to assist. Many women carry chamber pots in their carriages. Others simply hold it for as long as possible, then pray for a private bush and low foot traffic. You pass a shop window displaying perfumes and lace gloves, symbols of refinement. They promise the illusion of cleanliness, but you know better. Underneath, it's all sweat, grit, and quiet suffering. The city may smell like coal, but womanhood smells like lavender powder and suppressed agony. As you crawl into bed that night, your corset hangs from a chair, your cloth rags soak in vinegar, and your shoulders ache from holding so much shame in silence. You close your eyes and whisper a small prayer, not for beauty or virtue or grace, but for 5 minutes of privacy and a bar of soap that doesn't sting. It's early morning, and a shrill whistle blows outside your window. You peek through the cracked pane and watch a line of children, barefoot, soot-streaked, half asleep, shuffling toward the factory gates. Some are no older than 5. You pull your shawl around your shoulders and whisper a quiet truth. Childhood in the Victorian age smells like coal dust, boiled cabbage, and missed chances. If you're a child in this world, hygiene is optional. For many, survival takes priority over cleanliness. Street urchins wash in rain barrels when they can. Or they don't. Siblings share lice like toys. A quick rub with a rag and a slap of spit-slicked hair counts as grooming. Your fingernails are black crescents. Your ears? Let's not even discuss your ears. Even children from wealthy homes don't have it much better. They may have nannies and governesses, but baths are still rare, and clothes are often reworn until they collapse. A child in lace may look angelic, but peek under their pinafore, and you'll likely find red welts, sweat rash, or something growing a personality of its own. And the poor, they wear whatever they can scavenge. Ill-fitting boots with holes, coats stitched from scraps, undergarments made of flour sacks. One boy on your street hasn't taken off his socks since May. It's October now. They're less socks, more relics. Historians still argue whether children were actively neglected or simply swept up in a world with no room for softness. Likely both. Childhood wasn't sacred in the Victorian era, it was a workforce in waiting. And nothing captures this better than the chimney sweep. You hear the familiar scuffle of tiny boots on slate roofs. Chimney sweeps, small boys, sometimes girls, used for their size, climb into narrow, soot-choked shafts to scrub out the filth. It's dangerous, suffocating work. They often emerge coughing, crying, and completely blackened with soot. You watch one now, his face streaked with sweat and ash, blinking as he climbs down the ladder like a ghost of a smaller ghost. There's a condition named after these children. Chimney sweeps carcinoma, a type of cancer caused by prolonged soot exposure. That's how common the job is. You wonder how many of them know what's growing beneath their skin. You pass a ragged girl hauling water from a pump. She's humming, and her dress is soaked up to the knees with muddy water. She smiles at you with 2 teeth missing and hands chapped red. She's probably 7 or 5. It's hard to tell. She smells like old bread and dried sweat. She is, somehow, radiant. Inside the schoolhouse, if a child is lucky enough to attend, there's no soap, no running water, and usually no heat. Children share slates, pencils, and illnesses with remarkable efficiency. Colds spread like gossip. Lice travel faster than rumors. You once saw a teacher pick a beetle out of a student's hair and flick it into the fire without breaking his sentence. Upper-class children, in their grand nurseries, may have washstands and servants to assist with grooming, but even they face strange rituals. Hair is brushed with bristle paddles that tear the scalp. Teeth are cleaned with burnt sugar sticks. One child you know has a governess who insists on purging the wickedness with spoonfuls of castor oil every Thursday. He hasn't smiled in 3 months. Here's a quirky detail. Some Victorian families used to give their children cleansing balls, compressed bundles of soap, herbs, and baking soda meant to be used during rare bath times. They often doubled as toys. One boy mistook his for a cookie. He didn't eat for 2 days after. In workhouses where orphans and abandoned children are sent, cleanliness is a cruel joke. The wards are overcrowded, the bedding never washed, and disease is always lurking. Baths are cold, infrequent, and supervised by someone with a stick. You hear stories of children punished for wetting the bed, not with lectures, but with starvation or solitary confinement. Still, children are resilient. You watch two boys playing marbles near a dung heap, laughing like it's a park. One has scabs on both knees and no trousers. The other is chewing something that might be bark. They don't care. It's a good day. The sun is out. No one died on their street last night. And then there are the childhood diseases, measles, smallpox, scarlet fever. They sweep through cities like whispered curses. You once watched an entire household hang a black cloth over their door. No one went in. No one came out. One child survived. She doesn't speak anymore. As night falls, you light a candle and glance at your neighbor's window. Behind the glass, a toddler is curled up on the floor in nothing but a flannel shirt, hair stuck to her forehead. Her mother hums a lullaby, brushing her tiny scalp with fingers that haven't been clean in days. There's tenderness there, buried under grime. You lie back in your bed, trying not to think about the soot on your pillow or the cough rattling in your chest. Childhood may be short, brutal, and dirty, but somehow they still find ways to laugh through it. Another morning. Another layer of grime under your fingernails. You drag yourself from bed and reach for your shirt, which smells like boiled onions and despair. You sniff it. You sigh. It's going to have to do. Again. And so begins another day of fighting the ultimate Victorian enemy, odor, not disease. Not dirt, not even lice. No, the thing that truly terrifies respectable society is smell. In this world, how you smell says more about you than your reputation, education, or criminal record. To stink is to sin. The connection between personal odor and morality runs deep, and the result is a nation obsessed with masking the musk rather than addressing its root cause. You walk down the street, past a haberdashery, and catch a cloud of lavender powder wafting from the door. Inside, ladies are dabbing perfume onto lace handkerchiefs, murmuring approval like wine tasters. Some of them haven't washed in days, maybe weeks, but they smell like a blooming orchard on top of a compost heap. Victorians develop entire industries around the fear of bad smells. Deodorants don't truly exist yet, so people get creative. Charcoal pastes, alum blocks, powdered starch. You even know a man who rubs his armpits with crushed mint and then ties rosemary sprigs into his shirt collar. He walks around like a walking soup. Historians still argue whether this cultural obsession with body odor reflects true hygiene concern or just Victorian social anxiety run amok. Either way, no one wants to be the one who offends the senses. To be called pungent is practically a character assassination. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some enterprising perfumers start selling something called body soap balls, which are perfumed lumps of fat meant to be rubbed under the arms or tucked into corsets. One woman on your street swears by hers, until it melted during a heat wave and ruined her only silk blouse. She still wears it. She just turns it inside out. You visit a friend who's hosting tea. Her parlor smells like violets, lemon peel, and a faint undertone of cat. She offers you a scented sachet to hold under your nose in case the maid forgot to air the linens. You nod graciously and try not to inhale too deeply. Meanwhile, advertisements are everywhere. "Are you socially offensive?" asks one flyer. "Fix your face and your fragrance," demands another. There are powders for the feet, powders for the bust, and even powders for your mustache. You once tried one. You sneezed for 2 hours and smelled like stale cinnamon for 3 days. Men have it no easier. They're expected to keep their boots polished, their collars stiff, and their hair slicked with scented oil. But under all that, they sweat through wool suits, drink constantly, and bathe sporadically. One gentleman you pass today is wearing cologne strong enough to peel wallpaper. You give him a polite nod and a wide berth. Public transport is a smell gauntlet. Horse-drawn omnibuses are packed shoulder to shoulder with damp coats, wet shoes, tobacco breath, and that indefinable Victorian funk, a blend of coal smoke, pipe smoke, body, and despair. You hold your scarf to your face like a crime victim. And then there are the stink cures. One popular idea is that bad smells can be counteracted by other bad smells. Vinegar, for instance, is used to purify the air. Ammonia is sprinkled in corners. Some people even burn sulfur to chase the bad spirits. You once made the mistake of entering a house mid-sulfur cleansing. You staggered out weeping, convinced your eyelashes had curled. To be fair, some of the more forward-thinking physicians are beginning to suggest that cleanliness itself might be the answer. A few households install primitive showers or hand-pump bathtubs. But these are the exception, not the rule. For most, it's perfume or bust. One strange little trend is the nosegay, a small bouquet of flowers carried by fashionable ladies and gentlemen, not for display, but to be sniffed when encountering something offensive. You own one. It wilted last week, but you still carry it. The gesture matters more than the freshness. You once saw a doctor sniff a patient, then prescribe outdoor exercise and citrus. He didn't ask a single medical question. The man smelled of onions. Diagnosis complete. By the time you return home, you realize your own scent is complicated. You dab behind your ears with rose water, drop a bay leaf into your boots, and brush your teeth with chalk paste. You're still not what anyone would call fresh, but you've graduated from barnyard to library basement. You lie down at the end of the day, smelling like lemons, coal, and survival. Your room is warm with the scent of dried herbs tied to the window latch. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, and someone empties a bucket with a splash. You drift off, clutching your nosegay like a lifeline, praying that whatever dreams come next smell a little better than this day did. You stir awake to the clatter of hooves outside and the sharp tang of smoke in your nose. But something feels different. A chill in the air, yes, but also something less tangible. Change. You sit up slowly, and somewhere deep in your soot-caked lungs, you feel the faintest breath of a new idea. What if the filth isn't just gross, it's dangerous? Welcome to the dawn of germ theory. For centuries, people have blamed disease on bad smells, curses, unbalanced humors, or sleeping with the window open during a full moon. But now, in laboratories and lecture halls, a few brave souls are beginning to whisper a new hypothesis. Maybe it's not the air. Maybe it's tiny living things, invisible. Dangerous. Everywhere. You hear the name Pasteur for the first time, a French scientist experimenting with spoiled wine and silkworm diseases. He's discovering that microorganisms, not miasma, might be the real culprits behind illness. And across the channel in Britain, Joseph Lister is taking things further. He's dabbling with something radical, cleaning surgical tools before using them. The audacity. You ask your neighbor, the one who saw his leg off 2 months ago, what he thinks. He shrugs. Didn't do me much good, did it? He gestures to the empty space beneath his blanket. But the stump healed better this time, smelled less. Historians still argue whether germ theory's rise was driven by science alone or by desperation. After decades of plagues, cholera outbreaks, and public panic, maybe people were just ready to believe something that explained the invisible horror stalking their streets. But it's a hard sell. Doctors are stubborn. Surgeons scoff. You want me to wash my hands between patients? What am I? A fishwife? One even claims that bacteria are a hoax invented to sell more soap. You choke on your tea. Still, the idea spreads, quietly at first, then louder. Hospitals begin experimenting with carbolic acid to disinfect wounds. You see nurses wiping down bed frames, wearing cotton masks, changing linens more than once a month. It's nothing short of revolutionary. You visit a new clinic that smells not of death and despair, but of pine. The walls are pale. The windows open. There's sunlight. A doctor washes his hands in front of you, twice, and even trims his fingernails. You want to cry from joy. Of course, Not everyone adapts. One old barber surgeon refuses to boil his instruments, saying the rust adds character. He's currently banned from 3 neighborhoods and counting. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some Victorians believe germs can be seen with the right lenses, and spiritualists start holding seances to communicate with microbial entities. One woman claims her dead husband returned as a waterborne parasite. You decide not to follow up. You pass a chemist shop and see new products on the shelves: antiseptic sprays, medicated soaps, even bottles of Lister's disinfecting elixir. People still drink it, thinking it will kill germs in the throat. You're not so sure. It smells like menthol and boot polish. In schools, teachers begin telling children to wash their hands before lunch. In churches, parishioners are discouraged from sharing the same communion cup. Change is slow, but it's visible. The old world, reeking and festering, is still here, but now it has competition. You hear whispers of cities in Europe building vast underground sewer systems, miles of tunnels designed not to hide waste, but to move it far away. Paris has one, Hamburg. Even London is catching on, though begrudgingly. You walk past a construction site and see engineers lowering gleaming pipes into a trench. It's like watching the future burrow underground. But germ theory also brings fear. Now that people believe illness is lurking on doorknobs, coins, and coughing strangers, paranoia blossoms. You watch 2 ladies cross the street to avoid a sneezing beggar. They fan themselves with lace, doused in clove oil. One wears gloves over her gloves. The city begins to split into 2 worlds. One still clings to vinegar, incense, and wholesome breezes. The other demands bleach, boiled linens, and sterilized utensils. You find yourself caught in between, washing your hands more, yes, but still sniffing your neighbor's perfume sachet for luck. A small hospital opens near your street with a bold promise: no deaths this month. The sign is chalked on a board outside, proudly. You walk in out of curiosity and see a nurse wiping a doorknob with alcohol. You nearly faint with admiration. At home, you clean your chamber pot more often. You add lavender, yes, but also scrub it with soda ash and boiling water. When your landlady asks why, you tell her, invisible creatures. She narrows her eyes. Like fairies. You nod. Exactly. You go to sleep that night under a clean sheet. The air still smells of coal, but there's something else too. A thin thread of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the world is starting to understand the problem. Not just the smell, not just the dirt, but the tiny, silent things beneath it all. It's a new day, and you notice something you haven't felt in weeks: a light breeze through a freshly opened window. You breathe it in, only a little soot, less manure, and for once, no burning tar. Could this be what progress smells like? The streets are still rough, of course. There's mud and refuse, and the occasional puddle of mystery sauce. But now, you see something new in between the filth: drains. Actual functioning drains. Rainwater flows somewhere other than your boots. And the sewer smell? Still awful, but it's beginning to be contained. The long, slow scrub toward clean has begun. In London, the visionary engineer Joseph Bazalgette is quietly digging the city a new set of intestines: 1,100 miles of underground sewage tunnels. They're grand, they're brilliant, and they're designed to carry the stink far, far away. You walk past a construction site and see laborers sweating through brickwork while a foreman mutters about pressure valves. You don't understand any of it, but you want to hug them all anyway. Your neighbor, the one who used to dump his pot out the window, now trudges every morning to a municipal sewer grate. He complains loudly about the inconvenience, but you notice he's walking straighter, breathing easier. Bathhouses are expanding. Some offer private stalls, others even promise warm water. Warm. You hear talk of public hygiene centers with tiled floors, towel rental, and optional soap. One opens near the market. It's so clean you could faint. You do, actually, but only a little. Historians agree that this shift wasn't overnight. It took tragedy, science, and a whole lot of stubborn mopping. But slowly, the idea of preventing illness, rather than just mourning it, caught on. Sanitary reformers, social campaigners, and engineers all pulled the city upward, one bar of soap at a time. And let's talk about that soap. It's cheaper now. Factories churn it out in bars and powders. There are even adverts for toilet soap that don't mean it literally goes in the toilet. One brand claims to make your skin as pure as a nun's thoughts. You try it. It smells like lemons and judgment. Here's a quirky little fact. Some middle-class homes start installing their own bathing rooms. Not full bathrooms, just a space with a tub and a drain. Plumbing is still a tangled dream, but you once visited a cousin whose bath had 2 taps, one for cold, and a suspiciously hopeful, hot one that rattled like ambition. And then there's clothing. Laundries become professionalized. Bleach enters the scene, as do washing powders and hand-cranked wringers. You even see a neighbor dry her linens on a retractable clothesline, a contraption so futuristic it feels like witchcraft. Personal hygiene follows suit. People start brushing their teeth daily. Some even floss. Shoes are polished. Hair is washed once a week, or at least sprayed with less deadly oils. The lice aren't gone, but they're on the defensive. One fringe tidbit? A traveling speaker claims that cleanliness will lead directly to world peace. No war ever started between 2 bathed men, he says, sweat glistening under his hat. You're not sure about his logic, but he smells nice, so you let him continue. The moral panic around odor slowly shifts. Now, being clean isn't just about status, it's about being modern. Schools teach hygiene. Workhouses are forced to bathe children weekly. Employers start requiring neat appearance clauses. Your landlady even installs a hand basin in the hallway, though the water's cold and smells like metal. One day, you see a chimney sweep with clean fingernails. You cry a little. Public health notices go up across the city. Wash your hands. Boil your water. Don't spit in the street. People grumble, but they start obeying. You watch a man wipe his boots before entering a pub. A miracle. You start taking pride in your own cleanliness. You find yourself boiling your socks twice a week. You scrub your nails with a brush. You change your pillowcase once, then again. You even hang lavender sachets from your drying line, not to cover the smell, but to add something nice. As night falls, you sit at your window and listen to the hum of a cleaner city. It's not perfect. There are still rats. There's still disease. But there's also hope. You look down at your hands, washed, pink, raw, and smile. You don't miss the vinegar rags. You don't miss the chamber pot ballet. And you certainly don't miss the airborne buckets of mystery. And now, the candles are low. The city outside is quieter now, softer around the edges. A warm draft moves through your room, maybe just a trickle from the hallway, but tonight, it feels like fresh air. You exhale slowly. The past is grimy, yes, but fascinating in its own way. There's something oddly comforting about watching humanity stumble forward, dragging its muddy boots toward progress, one awkward bath at a time. Close your eyes now. Picture a quiet London street. The fog is still there, curling gently beneath gas lamps. But the gutters are cleaner. The drains deeper. Somewhere, a young boy washes his hands without being told. Somewhere else, a doctor scrubs his tools before surgery, humming as he does. These are small acts, but powerful ones. Let that thought settle in your chest, the idea that things can get better, that no matter how messy, how smelly, how absurd the world becomes, someone, somewhere, will pick up a mop. So let it go now. Let the sounds fade. Let your muscles soften. You've survived this stroll through sooty streets and scandalous smells. You've lived a dozen dirty days in just a few hours. And now, it's time to rest. Inhale once more. And as you drift, remember, even in the filthiest times, people still dreamed of fresh sheets, warm baths, and a world that smells a little less like manure.